Welcome to Forever Motorsport, and a very interesting thing we'll be talking about today is, has Red Bull hit their ceiling for this season in terms of the concept that they currently have? An interview that has come out from Red Bull technical director Pierre Wash has conceded that the team might have hit the ceiling with the development of its F1 car, although reckons that the overall limit has not yet been reached. But very interesting to talk about the fact that obviously with new regulations coming in next season, brand new car, for example, how much better and how much more can they get out of this car, which is very significant given the fact that they are being beaten and that they have been caught. And interesting enough, he's also actually said that from a Red Bull perspective, they actually expected the competition to arrive and be competitive a lot earlier this season and are not massively surprised by it. So we're going to get into this in a little bit and look at some of the quotes as well as having a look at what this might mean for this weekend. Before we do that, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channels as well. So speaking to motorsport.com, an interview that came out this morning, as I said, Red Bull technical director Pierre Wash has said the following. He was asked if he had delivered as he had expected in preseason, and he said, I would say not really. We improved compared to last year without doubt, but we didn't deliver what we expected in some areas, especially in the high-speed corners. We expected a little bit more than what we have. Without thinking about the competitiveness of this car, so just based on our own references, we expected a little bit more with our tools. Admitting basically the car isn't performing to the sort of the caliber and the standards that they were hoping. He said that I think some aspects can be linked to the correlation about the cause in terms of the wind tunnel, obviously not having as much wind tunnel time. So he says we are using quite an old wind tunnel, and it can also be linked to the reduced capacity due to our position in the championship, and maybe also the fact that this is the third year with this type of regulation. So that's kind of that whole sort of competitiveness part. The fact that the amount of time you get in your wind tunnel is sort of dictated by where you come in the championship. He was then sort of spoken about, is this maybe, have they hit the limit? He said our ceiling with regards to this specific concept, maybe, but this doesn't mean that it is the overall ceiling. He says, in this business, you take ideas from the others as well. During the past 2 years, people took our ideas, but fundamentally, you need the others to find some other stuff as well to make a step. I think that is starting to happen now, and that gives you a different ceiling. So basically, almost sort of saying that in terms of what they were planning on doing, yes, that is, maybe that they've hit their sort of threshold, but there could be lessons learned in other teams, for example, which could maybe sort of feed into what they're doing with the car, try and maximize this car for the season and try and get over the line and get that championship, the third one in a row. He, in terms of asked about the fact that, for example, McLaren and Ferrari and Mercedes are catching up. He was asked about whether he expected they expected to see these cars being competitive, and he said as follows. He said, I think we expected the opposition to come earlier, to be honest with you. When we started the 2022 season, we didn't have the quickest car. Ferrari had the quickest car beginning of 2022. We expected a massive competition in 2023, but that didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, they completely walked the floor last year. He said, we also expected the competition to be there more or less from the start of this year. We expected the others to be very close because the performances you can find with the car is, of course, limited under the same regulations. After the first 4 or 5 races, the others came back, maybe with an offset and a bit of a delay, but we expected that from the start, to be honest. And he was then asked finally about whether the gap was down to other teams getting better or Red Bull not progressing as much as that as they could have expected. He basically did a combination. He said, I think it's both together. He said the limitations you have with these regulations are quite high, and what you can find to make more steps is getting more difficult, of course. Then it is almost sure that because you keep the same regulation, the opposition will come back at some point. I suppose in many ways, kind of basically admitting that the regulations are doing what they're there to do, because that's kind of the whole point, isn't it? The idea of the regulation is to make it more difficult for the teams right at the top to continue to stay at the top and to kind of try and bridge the gap. It's almost like a handicap system in golf, in terms of the better you are, the better you've done, the less resources you have access to from a wind tunnel, for example, a couple of other to try and sort of make sure that you don't just sort of go too far ahead, to try and kind of even the playing field, because we need the sport to be competitive. Some people might say, oh, whatever, don't put in any regulations. They must just do what everybody wants to do. But the problem is we've seen seasons when they've not been competitive because one car has been too dominant. And there is such a thing as too dominant. At the end of the day, this is a sport, especially in this the type of sport where the technology takes center stage. It's one thing when we talk about, running shoes for runners and, other equipment like cricket bats and cricket and the likes. This is so central around the equipment. And we see such a big difference between, your Alphas and your Red Bulls, for example. There needs to be regulation to try and keep that gap as small as possible to make it as competitive as possible. So it's interesting, almost sort of conceding that they've definitely not been where they want to be, that they're not entirely certain whether they're going to be able to keep pushing that, and maybe even conceding that they need to start looking what other teams are doing in order to remain competitive and to maybe even reestablish the kind of dominance that we saw at the beginning of the season. The question is, can they do it, and can other teams catch up and almost sort of overtake them, whilst they try and figure out what is going where? Look, this is also Red Bull, which might say this, and on Thursday completely clean up, this weekend, completely clean up over the weekend and go, 1-2 on Sunday. So you always have to kind of be cautious whenever you get to look at this sort of feedback from Red Bull. They're always quite cautious about talking about their dominance and their speed, for example, then often go and overperform than what their comments might suggest. What do you think? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel as well. Very much for watching. My name is Steve. That is.